Welcome to the Bourbon Van. I'm Phil. It's Whiskey in the Van Wednesday, and today we're trying Nelson's Greenbrier Distillery Belle Meade Reserve 108.3 proof bourbon. So this is yet another bourbon brand that's rising from the ashes of Prohibition, but the story behind this one is pretty fantastic. Back in 2006, two brothers, the Nelson brothers, were just out of college or just about out of college, and they were driving to a butcher shop north of Nashville, Tennessee, where they lived. They pulled over for fuel in this small town, happened to see a historical marker along the highway. They had heard stories of possibly their family distilling in the past, but they always thought that maybe it was more moonshine. According to that historical marker, Nelson's Greenbrier Distillery was a successful distillery during the late 1800s and early 1900s. Once they arrived at the butcher shop, they asked the butcher if he knew anything about that old distillery. He pointed across the street at some buildings that still existed from the old operation. So the Nelson brothers then went to the Greenbrier Historical Society, and not only did they discover information about that old distillery, but they found some old packaging. One of the brands that was produced back in the day was none other than Belle Meade, and the label you see on this bottle uses the very same graphics that were on the original bottle. As a matter of fact, the two horses on this label were real horses that really existed. The silver horse on the right is famous because of his pedigree. Some of the greatest racehorses in history were born from that horse's bloodline. The other one, I don't really know much about, but his name is Brown Dick. There's a lot more to this story than what I'm giving away, so go to the website and check it out. But what I really like about this story so much is that two brothers discovered their family heritage, effectively, and rather than just enjoying it as a family story, they got to work and they built a distillery. I have to think that Charles Nelson, who ran the original distillery, would be really proud of them for resurrecting this distillery. So in order to jumpstart the distillery, and still to this day, this bottle here contains MGP distillate. MGP, of course, Midwest Grain Products of Indiana. You can go back to our review of Remus Repeal Reserve Batch 2 to learn a lot more about MGP. I won't get into it here, but I wanted to identify just what is in this bottle here. This reserve bottle was originally a cask strength product. This is small batch. It's 108.3 proof. So according to Nelson Greenbrier Distillery, the reason that this is no longer a cask strength product is because they thought it was a better product overall. Some people say that another company has come in and purchased a large share of this distillery, and that they dictated that they didn't want to see cask strength fluctuating anymore down the road. Whatever the reasoning is behind it, the original cask strength was really growing in popularity and was quite beloved. I had never tried that one, so this 108.3 proofer is my first experience with the Nelson's Greenbrier Distillery and with this Belle Meade line. They also have a lower proof product that sells for around $39. Haven't tried that yet, but it's on the list. So the distillate that gets used to make this bourbon is two different mash bills with two different yeast strains, aged 7 to 11 years, although they say that some of the barrels that they use go beyond 11 years sometimes, depending on the batch. On top of the heat that I'm expecting from the 108.3 proof, I'm also expecting some rye spice because this is a high rye mash bill. Additionally, this is non-chill filtered. Non-chill filtering improves mouthfeel, it can improve flavors. I'm expecting this bourbon to be sort of brash, loud, really flavorful, so I'm excited. Let's rip this thing open. What a terrific cork pop. Wow, okay. The cork alone is the oakiest cork I've ever smelled in my entire life. Let's get into this pour. We've got ourselves a nice big pour here, so let's get right into this nose. Wow, that is so much oak. And a little bit of proof, but not nearly as much ethanol as I expected on the nose for this proof point. Tons of oak. A little vanilla, some spice maybe. It smells like maybe a citrus spice, maybe an orange spice, maybe cinnamon or some other baking spice, but really subtle aromas on this nose. My mouth is watering. I think it's time to go in for a sip. Cheers. It's a little hot, but it's good. Right off the bat, so much oak. Like I just licked a freshly used oak stave from a bourbon barrel. That probably doesn't sound appealing, but it's really good. I appreciate sweet oak on the palate, and I'm getting that everywhere here. I'm getting maybe some stone fruits like a plum, and maybe even those little suckers you get at the bank when you get a cream soda one. That's showing up on the back of the palate here. So far, tons of sweetness, tons of oak. Let's go for another sip and see what else we find. Caramel, vanilla, oak, so much oak. Wow, this is not an oak finished or double oaked bourbon or anything like that. The rye spice is there. The funny thing is that I expected there to be a lot of heat on this, and I'm not getting a ton of heat. That high rye mash bill is showing up. I'm getting a lot of that rye tingle on my tongue, which could be confused for heat considering the high proof point on this bourbon, but it's definitely rye, and even that's contributing a fruitiness, almost the way that Old Forester rye has a lot of barley in the mash bill, and you get some bright fruit notes on the tongue. I'm getting some of those notes in here. They're more stone fruit than bright red fruits, not so much cherry and strawberry, more like plums and that sort of thing. Let's go for a third sip. There's a lot to unpack. This is a really complex bourbon. Definitely some brown sugar now. That oak, it's really something. Usually when a bourbon has this much oak in it, it's too much oak. It can go funky, it can totally overwhelm the other flavors. In this case, it's all playing really well together. It's just unexpected. I did not think there would be this much oak in this bottle. Although considering that the bourbons that they used to blend this are 7 to 11 years old, I shouldn't be surprised by a really nice oak presence. I just didn't expect it to be so oak forward. Let's have one more sip and we'll talk about the finish. It's a really long-lasting finish. I feel like I'll wake up in the morning tasting vanilla and some rye spice and some oak. It's really pleasant, it's really flavorful. You won't forget you're drinking this one. It's going to command your attention. There's a lot to unpack, there's tons of complexity. The finish goes on forever. Wow, this is a really, really interesting bourbon. I think we have to talk value, and I'm not even sure where to start. So this bottle sells here in Oregon for $70. That price point at first blush seems really high for a blended product sourced from elsewhere. As much as maybe you want to support traditional distillers, there's no denying properly blended, sourced whiskeys don't just have their place, but they're carving out a niche of their own, and this bottle is certainly doing that. So this bottle retails for $70. Let's say your budget is $60 to $80. What else is in that range? Elijah Craig Barrel Proof at about $60, ranges from 120 to 130 plus proof. Old Forester 1920, you're looking at about 115 proof. Both of those are really well balanced, super flavorful, and would be a suitable replacement for this. But I would say that the uniqueness of this bottle has to be taken into account. This does not taste like any other traditional bourbon that I've had this year, and I have to say, I'm really enjoying this glass. It's hard to think of bottles that are direct competitors to this one. I don't know that any exist. I would really like to know if you've tried this bottle, or if you've tried other bottles in this price range, or even MGP sourced stuff that you think stands up pretty well to this bottle. I'm curious to know what else is out there that you've compared to this bottle that you think stands up to it or can hold a candle to it at the $70 price point. Just a few weeks ago, we did a Remus Repeal Reserve Batch 2 review. I enjoyed that a lot, but I didn't think it was worth the $88 price point. This is $20 less, a proof point of 8 points higher, and in my opinion is a way more unique bourbon. It drinks hotter for sure. The Remus is a very pleasant, very nice drink that I'm really fond of, but this bottle here, even though it's more affordable, I think it offers more in terms of flavor, in terms of uniqueness. I'm a really big fan of this bottle. There's not a lot more that I can say about it, so I'm not gonna drone on. I'm just gonna enjoy some more. So I'm really curious to know, have you had this bottle? What'd you think? What do you think stands up to this bottle or is a better deal? Tell us all about it in the comments. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please do, and hit that bell so you never miss a video from us. I'm gonna get back to this glass because I just think there's a whole lot more to enjoy here. So from wherever we are to wherever you are, cheers.